Okay, so we would have to do a little rundown of what we did in our previous class. We talked about project integration management,
Mm-hmm.
and then we said project integration management has to do with every other project and how they are every other sub processes and how they are connected and the trade-off which they have. And in it, we look at the start of a project, and we went very, very down to start talking about the close project office. In the close project office, we said we would have to close procurement, like the individual projects which we have done, and also sign off with the vendors. Then at the end of the day, we translate that into the closing of the project. Okay, so that covers all the phases from beginning to end. So today now, what we have here is a project scope management. The project scope management is
Can you make it a little bit bolder?
okay. Okay, let me see if that is possible from here. A little bit bolder. I could not organize my slides
Okay, go
very
on.
well because
No, go ahead, go ahead.
okay, let me see if I have the right slides. Okay. Okay, that is about that. So the project scope management, which we are to look at today, it's the most important thing. If anything goes wrong at this phase, we may not be able to bring the project back to track because this is the beginning of the project. It is in this place we take steps, decisive steps to want to understand our clients and what is required of us. And also, we would also be getting in touch with all the stakeholders and what would they want us to put on the project. And that is why we say this aspect of it would first of all start with the plan scope management.
Plan scope.
Yes.
Project scope management starts with the plan scope.
Plan scope management, yes. So these are where we have to put together procedures, policies, which we would use in planning scope on the project. This is what is initial part. I'm introducing it. We'll have to go in detail to talk about that. And then having done this, coming up with a plan, we have the plan on our table. Okay, this is how we would define scope. This is how we would have to assess them to collect the requirement. We move on to the next phase, which is the collect requirement. And in this collect requirement, we've talked about it, is for us to now go back to all the stakeholders which we have identified, and we talk to them to understand their needs as regards our project. Then we have them documented. When we put all these requirements, for instance, like the project, which, if you would allow me, would want to use, okay, let's say the design of a bottling for a potable water. Let me use that. That could be typical. If peradventure we have about 5 different owners, that is 5 clients, they may not have the same requirement for that product. Some would say, okay, I would want the design to have pink. Maybe the females that are within them say, okay, let there be a touch of pink, at least to appeal to women. And the men could be looking at blue colors. So no, we have to integrate all this. Some would say, okay, let the cover be blue or maybe dark. All this we have to integrate it. And once we integrate all these, we will come up with the 2 things. It's either we are coming up with the product description or we are coming up with the project description. So 2 things we will have: product and project description we'll come up with. So that one done that leads us to defining the scope. So in this process, we'll come up with a detailed description of the project and the product. This is where
in this collect requirement.
After the collect requirement, we move into when we assemble the requirement, we'll come up with a statement for it. We may not ambiguously leave it, you know, because as they are bringing things in, their ideas, some will say, okay, let it be 1 foot tall, some will say, okay, let it be this wide, let the radius of the bottle be this and that. We are assembling all that. And then in this collect requirement phase, we are expected to look at where two requirements from two different stakeholders, if peradventure we have more than one stakeholders, are conflicting. So where they are conflicting, what do? We ensure that we unify what is to be there by talking to them. And certain times the stakeholders may not have equal stake. So at the time where votings would be made for certain things, the one with the highest stake may likely win. So that is about when we're dealing with different stakeholders. So I said in this area, we'll give birth to two kinds of scope. We'll give birth to the project scope and birth to the product scope. The product scope is the features of the product, the finished product. If it is a construction project, what are we doing? Okay,
project scope and
product scope, project scope and product scope. The product scope is what the client, the customer, wants from us. That is what they want from us. Why the project scope is how and what we will do to give them what they want from us. So two kinds of scope. So one leading aspect of the project scope is the schedule. We'll talk about the schedule. That is one leading aspect of the project scope. And how do we get the schedule? That brings us to the next item, which is to create work breakdown structure. We have to create work breakdown structure. What is the meaning of creating work breakdown structure? It is for we, the project team, to come together to now start subdividing the project deliverables and the project work into smaller and more manageable components. That is about that. Smaller and more manageable components. That's the create work breakdown structure. And now what are we subdividing? We are subdividing the defined scope. The defined scope came up with a scope statement. And here now we are breaking it down. The entire scope, we want to cascade them in certain ways that it will be easier for us to make plannings, easier for us to manage, easier for us to define, to make a time estimate, easier for us to make financial estimate.
Okay, after the schedule, is it design scope, right?
No, just hold on with the schedule. Let me re-explain that. I said when the scope had been defined, now we will come up with two kinds of scope. We'll come up with the project scope and the product scope.
And the product scope.
Yes, I now said the product scope has to do with the features of the product. And then the project scope, the major aspect of the project scope is the project schedule. So all these are still within the defined scope as I'm moving it down. So then after the defined scope, we will move to the next level called the create work breakdown structure. To draw work breakdown structure. The work breakdown structure, that is...
The work breakdown structure is under project scope now, under schedule now.
It is not. I just use schedule to explain, don't put it together, isolate the schedule. But to let it, I should isolate it. I just use something to explain project scope. The work
So
breakdown
that means
structure,
the work breakdown structure is not under project scope.
it is not under project scope. Now, before we move on, I think let me just write these words down so you use it to guide yourself. Now, for project, we say we are talking about project scope management. Now, under project scope management, we have 6 sub-processes to deal on. Now, write it down. The first one is plan.
Wait, come again.
Okay. Plan project scope, like project scope management. That is what we are talking about. Project scope management. Now, it has 6 sub-processes. Number 1.
Project scope management has 6
sub-processes. 6 things we would do well to have our project scope managed correctly. So the first one is the plan scope management.
Processes. The first one is the plan scope management. Yes.
The second one is the collect requirements. The third one is define scope.
Define scope.
And the fourth one is to validate scope.
For validate.
Yes, scope.
The fifth one.
The fifth one. The last one now is control.
No, the fifth one. You say 6. You say 6.
Yes,
you give him
validate
you
scope.
give him plan scope.
Okay.
You give him collective requirement, define scope, validate scope.
Okay, no, you missed one. Create work breakdown structure. Sorry about that.
You
I missed
create
work breakdown structure.
That's number what?
Number 4. Create work breakdown structure.
Work breakdown
structure. So in brackets, you can write WBS in short form, because I'm going to be using that word.
What does WBS? Work breakdown structure. Okay.
Yeah. Okay.
And the fifth one is validate scope.
Yes, sir.
And the sixth one
is control scope.
Okay.
Okay, so now that you have this in perspective, it will be easier for us to understand it better. So let's recap. Let me restart it. But before we move on, get these 2 things. Every project has 2 kinds of scope: product and project scope.
Okay, every
project has 2 kinds of scope: product and project scope.
Projects.
So,
okay.
All right, so let me explain what this project and product scope is all about again before we move on to start taking the 6 step by step.
Okay.
The work that is required for us to accomplish or to deliver that product or the services that we are paid for becomes the project scope.
You just come again, say it again.
The work that is required for us to accomplish the job or to create the product or to carry out the service becomes the project scope. The work.
What would you accomplish the project? Wait, say the work that is required for us to accomplish the project. Yes. And what again?
the work that is required for us to accomplish the project or the product. In writing that. That is the project scope. What is expected of us to do? What should we do? What are the things that are required from us to be able to satisfy our stakeholders' needs? All these are modeled into the project scope.
Okay.
Then the next one, which is the product scope, has to do with the features, the functions, the characteristics of the product, or the features, the functions of the service that we are paid to carry out. Characteristics. Of the product. Let me take it back again. Now, see it as features. Product scope is the features of the product. The features of the product, or the functionality, or the character.
This is the feature of the product.
Yes.
Abi?
Yes, sir.
Or its characteristics.
Or its characteristics, or its functionality, or its function. Because functionality and characteristics, you can use the two together.
And characteristics. Of what?
The characteristics of either the product, the services, or the results we are paid to create. Either the product, services, or the results we are paid to create. Okay, so now you have understanding of this one. So it is easier for us now to move into the 6 sub-processes under project scope management and now start talking about them in detail. So like I said, the first one is plan scope management. When we plan scope
management. Hold on, you do the rush. Sub-processes of
project scope management.
No, I told you I'm not processes of projects management. One is plan scope management. Okay, let's start.
Okay, so you have the 6 written down there already?
Yes, plan scope, collective requirement, define scope,
okay,
create work, that's WBS, validate scope, and control scope.
Okay, now go back to the place you wrote collective requirement and re-edit it to be collect requirement.
So it's collective requirement, I wrote, so not collective,
okay.
Sorry, collective requirement.
So now, the very first one, which is the plan scope management, it is where we sit down together with our team and come up with knowledge, make definition of things, set rules and procedures on how scope management can be carried.
You're too fast.
Okay, it's also recording, so
okay, as you're talking, I'm learning better.
Yes, even me too. I learn better. I always want to learn better in the class first. So you sit down with your team and you want to carry out scope management, how you have to manage the project scope. And then all of you sit down and ask, okay, let's set up rules. Let's come up with procedures. Let's come up with plans on how we can define our scope, monitor it, correct it if should in case things are wrong, and make verification, check with the client. And so let's come up with procedures on how to go about scope management. So that is the meaning of the plan here now. If should in case things are going to be going wrong, what would we do? In this phase, you and your team will come up with a plan. You have it written down somewhere. So at the end of that plan, you have what is called the scope management plan. And now this scope management plan becomes part of the project management plan. Like we said, project has 10 knowledge areas and 5 major processes. The 5 major processes we talked about initiating the project, planning the project, executing the project, monitoring and controlling the project, and we talked about closing the project. So these 5 areas. So now as regards scope management, you must come up with a plan. Not everything should not go. We must organize ourselves on what to do and when to do what to do on our project. So that is it. So we need the project charter and the project management plan as our initial input, the 2 documents that are required of us, because we can't plan the scope of what the client wants us to do that is being given to us in the project charter. So we need that preliminary scope written there, because here now, we're coming up with plans on how to get that done. But you don't need a tool to run this. All you need is just people who have knowledges in that works area. If it is a pipeline, pre-commissioning or commissioning job, you need people who have hands-on experience in that area to assist you in understanding what is required of you as regards the scope management. They may not know scope management, but when you talk about the job with them, you now start understanding what the scope is all about, and then you go ahead and come up with the scope management plan. Okay, so that brings us to the next phase. Once the scope management plan is out, which is the collect requirements. And in this process of collecting requirements, you are getting in touch with all your stakeholders. We talked about it may be the government, it may be your direct client, the sponsor, the community, and sometimes your vendors in the market, most times they are part of your stakeholders to get in touch with. So you need to meet them and to collect their requirements. That is one area, one thing you're expected to do here. Hello, are you
here? Yes.
Okay, it seems the screen was freezing. So you meet them and you collect all their requirements, ask them of what they think about the project, what they want you to do in detail. Then now start talking. Most of them will say conflicting things. If peradventure you are dealing with lots of stakeholders, but no big deal, just capture whatever thing they are all saying. And when you capture this, you have to call for a meeting and you would start treating the areas that are conflicting, the areas that are ambiguous, to streamline them in an understandable way. So yeah, you have them all documented in a list that you will call the requirement documentation, the requirement document. You come up with requirement documents.
Good. Oh, no, no, no. Oh. So, in a list called, Abby.
Yes, requirements document.
Okay.
So haven't done this, but something would be missing. Who says what? Who said it should be blue? So you have to place the name of the stakeholder that says that in a column too.
Hmm.
So now in this requirement documentation, you move on to the next level that is called the requirement traceability matrix.
Hmm?
The requirement traceability matrix, like tracing requirements, a matrix, a chart that will help you to trace the requirements.
Requirement is a traceability
Requirement
matrix.
traceability matrix.
All right.
So requirement traceability matrix now brings you makes it handy for you to know all the requirements that have been given to you as against the initiators. So if peradventure you want to deal,
you froze, so I didn't hear that.
okay.
You froze, I didn't hear that.
Okay, but can you hear me now? Is it clear now?
Yes, yes.
Okay, so this requirements traceability matrix
Traceability matrix.
is you going ahead to create a table. In the table now, you are placing the requirements, placing the name of the initiator, the specific stakeholder that said the cover should be blue, the bridge should be painted with red. You must place his name there.
Mm.
And then also, you have to place what part is that requirement is in the project. What phase? Is he in the foundation phase? Is he in the block work area? So you place it there. And also if it is a function, you can say civil is within civil works, or maybe electrical requirements, and you place it. So you're creating a chart to know that, okay, if I have to deal with this thing, this is the man to go to. This requirement is based on installation of roofing sheet, is based on electricity. You know, you have all this written down in a chart. So it will be easier for you to use this requirement this requirement traceability matrix to manage the project. Okay, but the bottom line is that you gather requirements in the collect requirement phase. Having collected these requirements, you move on to the next phase called the define scope. It is from these requirements you would be able to define the scope. And what is scope? Scope is you coming up with a detailed description of the project and the product. You see where your project scope and your product scope is coming to play.
A detailed
description of the project and the product.
Okay.
And you know that the success of every project is hinged on how well the scope is defined. So you have to ensure that your scope is well defined, it's all inclusive. It accommodates every aspect of the project. That's why you have to make it detailed. You have to use greater specifics. Though certain times in the beginning of a project, you may not have all the detail. As you move into the project, be talking to stakeholders, the scope will be becoming clearer to you. In project management, we call that progressive elaboration. Progressive elaboration. The more we move, the clearer the project is to us. Progressive elaboration. Sometimes when we are moving into a new area, a territory that is not familiar with us, that we are not familiar with, rather, as we move on, we will be learning. There will be learning curves. So as we are learning, we will be populating our scope, making it better, fine-tuning it. So that is called progressive elaboration. Then another project management term for it, when the project is full of gray areas that we do not have a first-hand knowledge of, we call it rolling wave planning. Another word, rolling wave planning.
Rolling wave planning is another word for progressive elaboration.
Yes, rolling wave planning. That is what I call the Pekene car headlamp principle, the car headlamp principle. Okay, so
also called the rolling wave.
Yes, rolling wave planning. So just like you are set out to travel to Lagos, which is your destination at night, you may not see as far as Lagos from Port Harcourt at night. You may only see 50 meters away from your car headlamp as far as your the lamp can travel to. That is how far you can see. But if you dare travel the first 50 meters, you will see the next 50 meters, right? So you take every 50 meters and you plan them in detail, you move on. So when we are, like I said, we are in new territories that are not familiar with us, or we are not familiar with. And the client
project management, in career management, is not good to do long-term projections. We do short and mid-term.
It depends on if you're in a stable economy, you can do long-term projections, because as a project manager, certain times you'll be tested with projects that would last for 10 years. What would you do? There are bases. There are bases, and then you have to consider trends, past trends to project for material cost, material availability, and certain things to come up with your budget. You still have to plan, but you will plan with history. Just like the way the Nigerian economy is volatile and things are going up and up, it still has a trend. So if you are in touch with that trend, you would be able to know the commodity price in the next 4 years. Even if there are variances, it will not be more than 20%. Should I continue?
Go ahead.
So at the
you
end
of...
You
moving more than 20%. What if we're faced with the scenario that we're facing now, where within a space of 1 month,
yes, sir,
shippings jumped from 3.2 to 4.2, from 4.2 to 8.2 within 1 month?
Okay.
Yeah. That's well over 100% increase.
Yes, no problems with that. That is why you are the project manager. That you have to carry out your market research. That is where your what if, you use the word what if, because it is possible. And these are the things that you are identifying. This what if, we call them assumptions in project management. They are part of project management, all these assumptions. And when you assume, you tie it to historical information which you have. It is possible. And if your project will span into several months, several years, This is how you are expected to come up with your cost estimation. And letting the client, because first thing in the project is for you to educate your clients. Like we established in the beginning of our training, that our clients do not always know what they want, and they are not in touch with the market. So it is our duty to bring them up to speed, or else we would not have a good success. So always, when you're being asked to make quotation, and you go in touch and start asking, what is the price of chippings today? Okay, they say, okay, it is about certain amount. And this is your project. You're not only going to procure your chippings today, your aggregates today. You will buy now, buy in the next 2 months, buy in the next 5 months. You still are going to buy in the next 2 years. If it is 2 years or 5 years project, you are sure of that. And the client wants you to give them financial estimates around that. What would you do? Go back to time immemorial. Go project back to 5 years. How much was shipping? It's so and so figure. What is the factor of change? It has 200% increase last 5 years to today. But in a certain month, it moved with 20% or 30% increase. Can you see the graph? So this is what you will flip into the future and tell the client, for our funding reconciliation, month 1, this is the financial milestone that is required of you. And chippings that is this amount in this month may likely be so and so amount in and so and so month. Now we need 4 tons. So for this 4 tons, for instance, is $10,000. In the next 5 months, for that same 4 tons, we will need $20,000. In the next 1 year, for the 18 tons, we will need, that is how you project down. So because you have to touch the market. There are certain times, that's why certain times we sit on our desk, we make analysis of things. But that is only when we have the reports available at that time. But most times we will be required to carry out primary research, where which we'll be going to the market, talking to our customers, asking them, how much you used to buy chippings, sell chippings? Oh yes, before the president came in, this was the amount. And now look at how it is. Within these 6-7 years, 500% increase. Yes, so everything don't cost, everything. You see, even myself and official again, they are advising you. And then you go ahead to plan your project like this. The client may look at it and say, oh God, this your thing is too expensive. Why are you doing it like this? It's too expensive. This is chipping's price. But because of your experience, that's why you are advising them this. You have carried out your due diligence. They may not give you the contract if they are not as smart as you are. They may not give you the contract if they're not asking you and the other contractors that are bidding low to come and defend your bids. They may not give you, because most times the client is attracted to the lowest bids. But remember what I shared with us, the meat, the most economical and advantageous tender. In as much as a particular contractor is bidding high.
Wait. Let me write that in again. Meat.
Yes.
MEAT.
Yes.
Most
economical.
Most economical. Advantageous.
And advantageous tender.
Advantageous tender.
Yes.
All right.
So low bid today may impose a higher risk in the future. That is true. So that is why they always want you to come and demonstrate. I don't know if they still do it in with organizations in this nation, but most time the multinationals, they would want us to come in and dot all our I's and explain the basis of every assumptions which we have made. So they too can find knowledge in that trade, in that project, in that business. Because it's a way the client can get in touch with the market, sending invitation to tender to 20 potential bidders and asking them to come and talk about the project. You know, when you go through these bids, you must be close to the market. You would know who is lying and who is not lying. So that is about that. We are expected to do more than just allotting prizes. We still have to, when we get to project schedule management, I will talk about the process, the skills, the procedures we will use in making estimates, realistic estimates for time and money. So for now, we define the scope. We come up with the scope statement. When we define the scope, now we have a scope statement. Now this scope statement is what we would place in front of us. A definition, it may be one paragraph about the project. And then we carry it to the next phase for us to start creating the work breakdown structure. Like I said, create work breakdown structure is to subdivide the project deliverables into smaller and more manageable components. You are breaking it down like the construction of 3-bedroom bungalow. What would we do first? We do carry out site preparation. As we are carrying out site preparation, we may want to carry out procurement. And also foundation is part of it. And after the excavation, we place the substructure and we move on to block work. After block work, we place the trusses on top of it, where the trusses that will carry the roofing sheet, we place them. Look at all this, we've decomposed it into smaller, more manageable components. Then we move on to the phase of placing the roofing sheet. And thereafter, we may still want to come and carry out our plastering and finish up with our electrical installation works. Then we paint. Before we paint, we install doors. So you are decomposing the project, the scope statement, into smaller and more manageable components. Having done this, you can now start planning. Oh, plastering can take us 4 months. For these 4 months, we need 5 masons. We need 20 bags of cement. We need 30 bags of cement. And you cannot plan it. So at this level, you decompose it to a smaller, more manageable component, and which is called the work breakdown structure. So you can now see the job clearly. Like the document that you sent to me from the organization, the first organization as regards the pipeline, they have the work breakdown structure. They have broken the work into about 8 components. No, into 10 components. Very easy. They talked about we handling the community security issues. They talked about we mobilizing the equipment. They talked about we carrying out a leak test. And they asked us in number 4 to carry out cleaning of the pipeline. They said after that, we should blow dry the pipeline using a compressor. And they said, having done that, we should move on to the next phase and carry out nitrogen purging. Then we should carry out commissioning by using natural gas in the pipeline. Then they asked us to thoroughly clean the pipeline. And if we do that, we should demobilize the equipment. And then number 10, we should submit reports. This is the work breakdown structure. But you know that within these work breakdown structures, Like for instance, talking about carrying out nitrogen purging. We can still furtherly subdivide this nitrogen purging, further cascade it, further break it into smaller and more manageable components. True or false? Is it possible for us to further subdivide it?
Sure.
So when we do that, we will do, it is called the defined activities. But leave these defined activities, don't write it down, because I will talk about it in the next knowledge area. I just want you to understand that the work breakdown structures can be further subdivided. So next on your list, after the work breakdown structure, we have what is called the validate scope. And this is the process of formalizing acceptance of the completed project deliverables. You are formalizing acceptance. What are you doing? You are creating the deliverables and getting in touch with the project owner, looking at their acceptance criteria, and you're doing your job as in line with the work breakdown structure. So you are concerned with your what? Acceptance criteria. What should I do for you to accept this project? You now have to start writing those acceptance down, and now this brings you to what the project scope we talked about. Now you are looking at the product features, and also you're looking at what is required of you. What is required of you? It is the project scope. What are you going to do? You and your team. What are you going to put on ground is in the project scope. So as you're validating the scope, you're getting in touch with the acceptance criteria. And that would mean lots of inspections as you are carrying out you're executing the project. That which the customer would come and do, you are doing it with your in-house team. As they are creating, as they are building, you are inspecting, looking at the acceptance criteria, because you don't want, like we say, as a project manager, you don't want any error to get into the hands of the owner. So you put on the project manager's cap as a team member, and also you put on the project manager's cap as the client. And your parameters should be more stringent than the client. If your parameters are more stringent than the client's parameters, you would always meet their requirements. So having done that, it brings us to the control scope. And now in the control scope, you are monitoring the project, you are monitoring the product scope as they are carrying out the project. We have talked about it, but now, how do you monitor? You must be very close to what is happening there. You will pick the project, the work performance data, and you will analyze them as against the project management plan. You will analyze them against the scope management plan. Are we in line? If you are not in line, in project management, we call it scope creep. When the scope is creeping, it's called scope creep, which means unwanted changes are beginning to enter our project. Undesired changes are happening, changing our project scope. In a place where we wanted to use 3 bags of cement, all of a sudden it is 4. And now the messing man is even wasting cement. Can you see that? That is going to affect the budget. And also it will affect the schedule, the time required. Okay, there are certain times that instead of using 3 bags of cement, it could be cutting costs, wanting to use 2 bags of cement. Using 2 bags of cement will require more sand, and putting more sand would, alter the quality required. Yeah. So
let's round up. Let me go and do exercise.
Okay, I'm almost running up. So having done that, we will come up with the work performance information. And if the work performance information is saying we are behind, we look for a
The
way.
work performance is in the validate scope state, not so.
The work performance control scope. As you
Control
are,
scope. Okay.
yes, as they are working, you are looking at what they are doing. What they are doing is the work data, work performance data. Explaining it writing it in an understandable manner becomes the work performance information. What it means. They're using 2 bags of cement instead of 3 bags of cement. What it means financially. What it means as against the quality of the project. So this brings us to the very, very end of what is expected of us to do within this knowledge area. So we will move from cradle to cradle, starting with the plant scope management, moving on to the defining of scope, then we create WBS, then we validate scope and move down to the control scope. So we will call it a day. When we meet in our next class, we will talk about project schedule management. So in this class, I would want you to let it be in a time that you have fully rested. Hello, it's like the network took you off. You went off the network.
Sorry, it went off.
Yeah, so like I was talking about our next class. In our next class, we will treat project schedule management. So let it be at when you are fully rested, because this is so much. And when we are done with the whole of this training, I would show you the MS project, the Microsoft project, and how you would use it to manage, to draw your project schedule. And if peradventure you are outsourcing it to one of your clients, it's good you too, as the Baba himself, knows what they're going to be doing. So
yeah,
so I'll show you that in this area. So this class will be when you have at least taken nothing less than 10 hours sleep. Okay,
next class, I would like also recap from the day 1 to this scope management.
Okay.
This project scope management. So let's know if I'm following or not.
Yeah, you are following. So when we recap, you will see them jumping out of you, and you'll be the one that will be talking more. And
on Monday morning, 5 a.m. still.
5 a.m. Monday morning. Okay, it's okay, sir. Okay. Thank you very much, sir. Have a nice weekend.
Thank you very much. Please send me this recording too.
Okay, I will send the recording.
All right,
Thank
thanks.
you very much. I'm grateful, sir.